What's up, legends, and welcome to my first impressions series, I guess. This is the first of 3 videos of the new Unmatched Marvel Redemption Row set. As you can see, it's on my shelf right there. And after getting a couple plays in with each of the characters, both online and in person, I thought I would do a video or two just going over my initial reactions to the new heroes, like with what I did for Battle of Legends Volume 2, but instead of one big video, people in the community responded to a poll I put out and said they wanted multiple videos, one for each character, so that's what we're doing here. Hopefully they're a little bit shorter and more digestible individually. Today's video is about Ghost Rider, but it's also the first video of this first impressions montage, so we're going to talk about the new map and new map mechanic for this set. And without further ado, let me say one more thing, and that this is a first impressions, so I have not a lot of plays with this character. Really, no one does, unless you've been secretly grinding Ghost Rider games for the last, 2 weeks when you've had this set. And there isn't really a lot of data available on matchups and stuff like that, so I'm really just throwing a dart at the board and kind of guessing how good this character is. I am probably going to be wrong, so take my opinion with a grain of salt. And please leave a comment letting me know what you think about this character, because I'd love to have a discussion about that. What was I right about? What was I wrong about? Was there something I didn't see that you see? Some hidden potential, perhaps? So please let me know in the comments and we can talk about this character. Let's talk about the map first. This is the Raft, the prison, I guess. If it's not obvious by now, I don't know anything about Marvel lore outside of the MCU. I didn't really read the comics. I haven't watched all the shows or whatever. I've seen season 1 of Netflix's Daredevil, but and I've seen the new Disney Plus shows like Loki and WandaVision and Captain America and the Winter Soldier. So Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Spoiler alert. So I don't really know anything about these characters or the locations. I know that this is a prison underwater. I think this is in Captain America's Civil War. So just looking at the map, there's nothing too special, I guess I want to point out. The starting spaces are here, and if I move off that, right here. So first player goes here, second player goes here, which is actually quite a bit far away. So aggro characters might not do that well on this map, like Bloody Mary or the Raptors, just because you're going to have to boost in to hit them turn 1, and it's a long way to go. The second player's zone is also pretty far away from the starting player, so Little Red might not be able to do the thing as easily on this map. We'll see. It looks interesting with this central gray zone in the middle with this nice orange zone just cutting down there. Might be an interesting place for ranged fighters to just sit. But the mechanic for this map are items. I'm pretty sure all the Marvel sets are going to have items, and basically there are a bunch of different spaces on the map with these item symbols attached to them. Vorpal board. And the set comes with 6 different items, 3 scheme items, and 3 versatile combat card modifiers. And at the start of the game, I guess you can either set them wherever you want, or you can just shuffle up the items and put one in a random spot. And so each game they could have a different layout, and how they work is when you're in the space, or one of your fighters is in a space with an item, if it's a scheme token, you can spend an action to scheme and use the item for whatever effect it has. And if it's a versatile item, whenever you are attacking or defending from that spot, when you place your card face down, you can declare whether or not you're going to use that item. And if you do, you add the number, the modifier, to your card's printed value, and you get that bonus for the combat. It is cancelable, like King Arthur's boost. And the numbers are just 2, and then there's 2 1s. So it's kind of like a high ground space, and there's only 3 of them, and they're a one-time use. In my games with this map, I really didn't find these too impactful, but it was a fun thing to play around with on the map, and I didn't find it as disruptive as Hanging Gardens or Baskerville were, because when I first started playing on both of those maps, I did not like them because they changed the game in a way where now instead of focusing on just killing your hero, you have to play around the dumb secret passages, and then all the high ground spaces are just a lot to think about during the game, where positioning is very important. It's what separates good players from great players, and just adding another nuisance on the map that they have to factor into all their calculations of where to move is a little bit annoying, but it does make the game interesting. I don't want to sound too pessimistic. Let's take a look at what these schemes actually do. The first one is security camera. Look at an opponent's hand, draw a card. This is an interesting effect, and I think in general these scheme tokens will be interesting because they allow characters that don't have like hand peeking built into their kit to do something that they normally couldn't do. And the fact that it also draws a card, I guess, is nice. It means this can't be used as a pass. So this, I think, is the best scheme token from this set, just because the other two are a little bit more situational. Just knowing what your opponent has is helpful. I don't think it's broken by any means, because they maneuver on their turn, they draw a card, and you no longer have perfect information the next time they go to attack you. So that doesn't really matter. I think this is only problematic if it's in this scheme space, and then the first player, if they're a move 3 hero, can just go 1, 2, 3 and use it as their second action and just know the 5 cards you started the game with. But in the end, is it that problematic? No. Secret Documents lets you discard your hand and draw 3 cards. This will be probably the most situational, because normally you keep your hand count big in this game, and it's just like not good to discard more than 3 cards and draw 3 cards. Actually, it's really only good if you're discarding less than 3 cards. 2, 1, or 0. You could discard a hand that's empty, and I guess drawing 3 cards, if you had less than that, is nice, depending on what you're yeeting out into oblivion. And the Raptors, I think, will be able to make great use of that effect, because they play at a low hand count just because they're so aggressive and they don't have any card draw built into their kit. So being able to draw 3 cards all at once for a scheme, it's like Riches Beyond Compare. I've gone on the record saying if the Raptors had 2 copies of Riches Beyond Compare instead of Coordinated Attack Pattern, I think they would be the best deck in the game. So this will be a cool card that most characters will not use. But Bloody Mary, she can discard her hand and draw 3 cards and end her turn, and then your opponent has to attack you. That could be fun. Electrified Floor. Sorry. Deal 1 damage to each fighter in your zone. This will be very interesting if it's in one of these 2 spaces, because now this central area is kind of like a death trap. This is really good against 1 health sidekicks that, like Dracula, Medusa, Robin Hood, Elektra, Muldoon will have. But of course, all those sidekicks, your opponent just won't move them into the zone with this card if you're just camping it. So I think more often than not, this will just be a deterrent and won't actually do anything. But it is interesting, I guess, if you want to like play keep away from your opponent, you can just go camp on this spot wherever it is and make your opponent's hero have to come engage you. This will be really good. Well, I should say it'd be really bad against Beowulf. So overall, I wasn't too impacted by these. I don't think the items changed the game that much. And it was just like a nice little, like, the fact that they're all one-time uses is fine. I think it just adds a nice little element to the game of positioning and things like that. You can use the versatile tokens to boost a defense of yours, and you can just camp on that, and if your opponent wants to attack you, you just get the bonus. And like +1 really isn't that impactful. +2 I guess is the best, obviously, but still not even that good. And you could also use them on attacks, which is just like a nice little thing to have. They are, I think Justin has revealed the items for the Hell's Kitchen set. I guess I'll just pull them up right now because I can. Okay, so these are the items for that set. As you can see, there are 2 +2s and 1 +1. And the schemes, recover 2 health, draw a card. That'll be really good for characters without healing. Map, your next attack this turn can target any space. So you take an action to make an attack with unlimited range. And Payphone, choose a card in your discard pile and return it to your hand. These 3 schemes are all better than the 3 schemes in this kit. And like I said, these are the items in the Hell's Kitchen set. I expect that the items in all the Marvel sets will be like interchangeable. You can just take any 3 random schemes and play them on any map that has the tokens on them. So that will be cool to see. Wow, the Hell's Kitchen schemes are so much better than the Redemption Row schemes, and the items are better too, I guess, because there's 2+2s instead of just 1. I don't know if they'll go higher than 2. +3 seems like a lot. They definitely won't do 4, but maybe they'll do like a red only or a blue only. Not sure. Interesting to see, and we'll keep those thoughts in mind for the future Marvel sets. Let's talk about Ghost Rider now. Someone in my comment section was like, take a look at the card backs. So we're going to do that and admire Nick Cage in all his beauty, just going, ah! I like his flaming skull, and I like that there's a chain border around the card. That's a nice little detail they added. So Ghost Rider, he is a melee fighter with 17 health and a move value of 2. Move 2 in melee is usually not great, except his ability gives him extra mobility, so it really isn't an issue. And 17 health is pretty beefy, although he doesn't really have the best block cards in the world. So he's slow but mobile and beefy but vulnerable. Best of both worlds, as they say. His ability is Ghost Rider starts the game with 5 hellfire. So this is a flippable token that has an active and inactive side, similar to Beowulf's Rage. It's basically Rage, except you have 5. Nice. And you start the game with all 5, unlike Beowulf, who has a max of 3 but starts the game with 1. When you maneuver, you may spend 1 hellfire. If you do, increase Ghost Rider's move value to 4. 4. That would be the highest base move value in the game. But no, it gets better. And he may move through opposing fighters. So you get the highest move value in the game, and you get the Buffy effect of being able to move through opposing fighters. But wait, there's more! Then deal 1 damage to each opposing fighter he moved through. So this is the Stallion Charge effect from Yananga's deck, where she has a 3-value versatile that says after combat, you may move Yananga up to 5 spaces. You can move through opposing fighters, and you deal 1 damage to each opposing fighter you move through. The key thing to note is that it deals damage just based on if you move through them, not the amount of times you move through them. So if you went like 1, moved over your opponent, 2, 3, moved over your opponent again, 4, it would still only deal 1 damage, despite the fact that you moved through them twice. That is by design, because it'd be stupid. So this is an interesting ability because it gives you probably the easiest damage on demand in the entire game. Think about Dracula or Medusa. They each have damaging abilities that only happen once per turn, and your opponent can play around them with positioning. They can not end in Medusa's zone, and they can not end adjacent to Dracula if they want to avoid taking the ping damage that they'll deal you. Ghost Rider, on the other hand, if he has 2 hellfire, he can vroom vroom or vroom mover or whatever it's called. He can vroom vroom, move through you, deal you a damage, and he can spend another hellfire, vroom vroom, and move through you again and deal another damage. So essentially, as long as he has hellfire, he can consistently deal 1 or 2 damage to you per turn without playing any cards. And I don't like that because it's not interactive. I think the best part of this game is the combat mind games. When you play a card face down and your opponent plays a card face down, and you're not sure what your opponent played, and then you flip them over, and oh, was it a bluff? Was I deceived, or no, did he just play his beast form and I am about to get wrecked because I played a regroup? That type of mind game is my favorite part of this game. It gives me an adrenaline rush every time I have to do that. And a character that doesn't necessarily need to attack you to win doesn't really seem that interesting to me. This will be really good against characters with 1 health sidekicks like Medusa or Dracula or Robin Hood or Ingen or Elektra or even Yananga, because her sidekicks have 2 health, and just heroes with low health in general like Luke Cage or Invisible Man or Robin Hood that you can just kill with your ability damage by just maneuvering back and forth through them, dealing them 1 or 2 damage a turn, and hopefully killing them faster than you can kill you, is, I don't want to say problematic necessarily, because that's probably a first impressions overreaction, but I just see it as unideal, if you will. Currently, the rules allow you to boost your Vroom Mover or your vroom vroom, and you have a lot of 2-value boosts in your deck, so you can move 6 spaces with your hellfire boost. And if your opponent just has to keep 6 spaces away from you in order to not get pinged twice every turn, it just becomes more about playing hide and seek than actually playing the game. And especially on some maps like Hero Rot or Baskerville or Raptor Paddock, the small maps or the maps that just give you a lot of mobility, Ghost Rider will be able to hunt down anyone, and if he can kill them without attacking them, I don't think that's very interesting. But of course, that is playing like a degenerate optimal way. I don't even know if that's the optimal way to play, because like I said, there's not enough data on this character. And from what I've heard from the designers, Ghost Rider, if he's using all his Hellfire to just ping you every turn, his defenses aren't really that good, and you can just kill him if you just slap him harder. You basically need to deal 2 or more damage in order to keep up, and like I said, his defenses aren't really that good, so it shouldn't be too hard for most characters. So that's definitely an overreaction. I don't think he's broken or overpowered by any sense of the word. I just think that might be a little uninteractive if the Ghost Rider player chooses to play like that, which hopefully you're not playing with someone like that. But in like a tournament setting when you're playing to win, who knows? We'll see if that strategy is the dominant one going forward. Let's take a look at his cards. The first card is Spirit of Vengeance. It's a 5-value attack. It says after combat, you may spend 1 Hellfire to draw 2 cards. So Commanding Impact is a 5-value attack that draws a card after combat. You can buff this with a Hellfire to draw 2 cards, and you can just effectively get a Commanding Impact that draws 2 cards, which is very, very good, especially if you want to keep your hand size up and you just want to have more options. Maybe you just need more boost fodder. I really like this card, and I think it's really interesting. And it's a very strong, solid attack to have in your offensive arsenal. The next card is I Brought the Devil With Me. This is another card that, or attack, I should say, that has an interesting interaction with Hellfire. You can spend 2 Hellfire after combat to gain 1 action. It's a 3-value attack, so it's kind of like a Jeet in that sense. It's a 3-value attack that gives you an action. 2 Hellfire is a little bit costly. Depending on how fast you can get it back with the cards in your hand. 2 Hellfire for an action might not be worth it, especially when you could just maneuver twice and use 2 Hellfire and ping your opponent for 2 damage instead of playing this as an attack. But if Ghost Rider is trying to get like a combo turn and wear down the opponent, it might be an interesting thing to do, although it'll be hard to like chain this together with multiple copies of itself, because if you play 2 copies of this for the actions, that's 4 Hellfire, and you're left with 1, if you even had 5 at the beginning of the turn. And if you're not putting the Hellfire into this to get an action, it's just a 3-value attack with no text, which is bad, to say the least. So I think this is an interesting card. It has potential. It's just a very thin line between actually useful and just like a little bit of a trap, or it might be a little too resource intensive for its own good. We'll see. But so far, there's interesting things to do with Hellfire besides just vroom vroom, baby. The next card is Blaze of Glory. It's a 2-value attack. It says after combat, spend any amount of Hellfire, deal that much damage to each fighter in Ghost Rider's zone, including Ghost Rider. So if you have 5 Hellfire and this doesn't get canceled, you can spend 5 and deal 5 to everyone in your zone. You can also just spend like 1 or 2 Hellfire and kill all the 1 health sidekicks in your zone. But if you're going to do that, why would you play Blaze of Glory and hurt yourself when you could just like use this card as a boost to move 7 spaces with your Hellfire Vroom Mover and just ping them all anyways? So in that sense, it's not, I think the intended use is to be like an AoE effect like that, but it's going to end up being like a get out of jail free card because of the way that simultaneous deaths resolve in this game. If Wiglaf uses Spin to Win, Remnant of Valor, and hits Beowulf, who's at 1 health, and Medusa, who's at 1 health, and they both go down to 0, the active player wins the game in a sense of like a both heroes are dead, kind of like tie situation. So if Ghost Rider is at 1 health and Invisible Man is at 5 health, and Ghost Rider has 5 hellfire and he uses Blaze of Glory and just spends all 5 to put himself at -4 and Invisible Man at 0, he will technically win the game because he is the active player. That is just how the ruling works for that general like simultaneous death clause. If it's from a card effect, then the active player wins. There might be a specific ruling about that in like tournaments, just because I think that is so silly that you can win the game while also having -4 health while your opponent has 0. But and it's like it's not going to have the intended effect of being used against multi-health sidekicks, I should say multiple sidekicks, sorry, because you can just remove her over them and not damage yourself. So this card has dangerous implications for me, and hopefully it is not used in a degenerate way, but I may be overreacting just because your defenses are not good. So often you will not be at a health advantage versus your opponent. So this card would be a lot better if you could maintain your health for the entire game, so that when you use this, you're at 15 and your opponent is at 10, and then you're fine going to 10 and putting them at 5. But a lot of times I think it's going to be switched. I think you'll be at like 5 and your opponent will be at 10, and you won't be able to use this card as like a win more card. And in that sense, when it's a win from behind card, get out of jail free, we'll see how it actually gets used. Next card is Chains of Hellfire. You might have been wondering, how do you get Hellfire back? Because Beowulf gets his rage back when he takes damage. You get your Hellfire back when you play a card that just gives you it all back, and you have 2 copies of this. So far you can gain 10 Hellfire for this scheme. Really solid, a really efficient way to get it all back, because when you consider like Beowulf's scheme Vigor and Courage, where your opponent randomly discards a card and you get raged equal to its boost value, that might not fully give you 3 rage every single time. But this card just guarantees you get 5. Nice for Ghost Rider, I guess. The other scheme in your deck is Hell Rides With Me. It also gives you Hellfire. It says move Ghost Rider and up to 1 adjacent fighter, up to 4 spaces each. Gain 2 Hellfire, gain an action. So when I was first playing this card, I was like, oh, I have Ghost Rider and I have an adjacent fighter. I can move them 4 spaces together. But that's not actually how the card works. You can move Ghost Rider 4 spaces that way and move the fighter that was adjacent to you when you played the card 4 spaces that way. How he does that on a motorcycle with his chains, I don't know, but that's how the card works. That'll be really interesting to play on Raptor Paddock or Baskerville or any map that has features that you might want to interact with your opponent. You can put your opponent on the low ground and then play something like a 6-value Spirit of Vengeance on Hanging Gardens. That will be cool. And the fact that it also gives you 2 Hellfire is cool, because with 2 copies, we're now at 14 Hellfire that you can gain back. And it gives you an action, so you could actually use this first action, move 4 spaces, and then you could double attack your opponent and basically start your turn adjacent to them when you otherwise wouldn't be, and still have 2 actions afterwards. Interesting card. The movement effect is also very interesting. This card and this card are the only 3-value boosts in your game, in your deck, I should say. So sometime during the game, you could actually move 7 spaces with one of these and a Hellfire Room Mover. The other card that can give you Hellfire is The Wicked Will Burn. It's like a momentous shift. It's a 3-value versatile. It says if Ghost Rider started this turn in a different space, gain 2 Hellfire. With 3 copies, that's 6 total Hellfire, so now we're at 20. I don't really see you playing this on defense a lot and triggering it. There is a way we'll talk about a little bit later, but a lot of times you're going to be using this on offense if you actually want to get the Hellfire, because a lot of times it'll just be a printed 3 on defense, and that's not so good. And gaining Hellfire back is always nice, and the fact that you have 3 copies of this, I think, is just like a solid card. Nothing too impactful because it's just a 3, but getting Hellfire back is something that you generally want to do, and you have other ways to deal damage in this deck, like this or this. The next card is Stoke the Flames. It's a 2-value block card. It says, after combat, if you lost the combat, gain hellfire equal to the combat damage you took. With a 2-value block card, you're probably going to lose the combat. You're going to take probably 2 damage every time you play this, at least, depending on the matchup, of course. Like against Bruce Lee, this will probably only get you 1 hellfire, but it's a nice way to trade your health for hellfire. You can use your health as a resource, which is a little bit dangerous for a character with not that much defensive capability. But this is kind of like Jekyll's scientific method, where he trades health for cards. You're trading health for hellfire, and essentially if you take 2 damage from this, you gain 2 hellfire, and then you use that hellfire to vroom mover, you deal the 2 damage back to your opponent. So it's kind of like an even trade in that sense. This is like a pretty safe play to play when you're at 0 hellfire, because your opponent will probably hit you big because you don't have hellfire to spend on other defensive card effects, and you'll take some damage and get most, if not all, of your hellfire back. If you get all of your hellfire back by taking 5 damage, you might be in a little bit of trouble, but I'd say generally taking 2 or 3 damage to get that much hellfire back is a fine trade for you. Next card is Deal with the Devil, another printed 2 block card. This is what I was talking about with limited defensive capabilities. It says, during combat, you may spend any amount of hellfire, increase the value of this card by that amount. So this is kind of like War King from Beowulf, except a little bit worse, but this could also be a 7. It's kind of like the opposite of this card. I see them as parallels in a way. This is like a good defense card to play when you're at like almost full hellfire and you need to block some damage, and you can be flexible based on what your opponent plays and blocks most of, if not all of, their attack. It's bad if you have like 0 or 1 hellfire, because then the max this could be is like a 3 and you're really not in a position to block a lot of damage from your opponent. Whoa, sorry about that. So hopefully you don't get into those positions where you have to play this card with not a lot of hellfire. The next card is Control the Demon. It's a 0-value versatile. It says, during combat, this card's value is +1 for each hellfire you have, and you do not have to spend hellfire for this effect. So this is like Epic Poem from Beowulf's deck, except this is versatile. And if you have full hellfire, this is a 5. You could attack with it or defend with it. Defending with it is probably the right idea, since this could be a 4 or a 5 much more easily than this card could be, or any of the other cards in your deck for that matter. And it's nice that you don't have to spend it, because you get some pretty decent value blocking out of this if you're at full hellfire. Again, it's like Deal with the Devil, where if you have 1 or 0 hellfire, it's not good at all, and hopefully you're not in a position where you have to block with it. But it can also be used as an attack. I probably wouldn't use it as an attack, because as you can see, you've got a lot of red cards already, and your defense cards aren't that great. So you might need this just value blocking, and the fact that you have 3 copies of it is something that I really like. Something I wanted to say about Deal with the Devil as well is this is my favorite card art from this set, because I love the Achilles Brothers in Arms card, because that's a handshake card, and we have another handshake card in the game. So I guess I can't refer to Brothers in Arms as handshake anymore, because there's 2, but I think nothing will fill me with more joy than seeing Achilles' handshake played into Ghost Rider's handshake. Make it happen, people. I want to see it. The next card is Pen and Stare. This is what I'm talking about, baby. 3-value versatile. It says, during combat, add the boost value of the opposing fighter's card to this card's value. You may spend 2 hellfire to do it a second time. So some decks, like Alice and Bruce Lee, have block cards with 4-value boosts. This card could be an 11 against them. That's a lot of damage. This is also just a really solid defense card, because a lot of times good attacks have high boost values. There's just like a correlation. Like Hunter's Eye from Robin Hood's deck has a 4-value boost. Excalibur and Larger Than Life have 3-value boosts. So on and so forth. Except there are some examples. Beast Form also has a 4-value boost. There are some examples where good attacks only have like a 1 or 2 boost, and it's just like, why is that? Like Luke Cage's Sweet Christmas, it's a 6-value attack. Pretty sure it only has a boost value of 1. So you could block 4 or 5 damage if you wanted to spend 2 hellfire. So there are some situations where it's a lot better than just any other block card in the game, and there are some situations where it's a lot worse. Hopefully you're ahead on health and can afford to use this as an attack instead of as a block card, but I think this is a really good option when you don't have a lot of hellfire, and things like deal with the devil or control the demon will just deal you a lot of damage. And stoke the flames, like if you have it in your hand and you have 0 hellfire, you probably play this over this, but this is just like a solid all-around option that will usually value block decently in a deck that kind of struggles too. Next card is I Finally Escaped Hell. It's a 3 value versatile. It says you may spend 1 hellfire to move Ghost Rider up to 2 spaces. I think this is a very mediocre card just because I guess you're going to play this on defense, right? Because I guess on offense you just have better options and you probably need to save your purples for defense in this deck. So if you're playing this on defense, I guess like if you're playing against someone from Battle of Legends Volume 2 or like a combo character that's going to attack you a bunch, you could play this move with the hellfire, and then if they attack you again, you play the Wicked Will Burn. And because you started their turn in a different space, you gain 2 hellfire. So you're spending 1, you're getting 2, that's a net gain of 1. That's a win, I guess. You could also play this against ranged fighters. If Robin Hood is attacking you from not adjacent, somewhere in your zone, you can spend 1 hellfire to move 2 spaces, and maybe you'll be adjacent to him after the combat, although Robin Hood isn't the best example because he can just hop with his ability. Let's say Medusa is attacking you. You play this, and you can move 2 spaces, and now you're going to start your turn adjacent to her, and you can attack her. The question in that scenario is, instead of spending 1 hellfire to move 2 spaces, why not just play this as a blank 3 and then spend 1 hellfire to move 4 spaces and deal a damage if you can move through them? So this is a weak card, but I guess you have a lot of other pretty good stuff going on in this deck, so fine. It's like the regroup of your deck. Speaking of basic cards, the last card in your deck is Faint, which you only have 2 copies of. 2, not 3. Interesting to know. So looking at your defense package, you have nothing higher than a printed 3. You have these 2 cards, and I guess this card for value blocking, except this is very expensive. You have some 3s that don't really do anything on defense, and you have like a scientific method type card where you're spending health to get a different resource. And with only 2 feints in your deck, you're not going to be really good at effect blocking, and you're already not the best at value blocking either. So your defense package is pretty mediocre unless you're spending hellfire in order to make it not mediocre. But if you're doing that, then your offensive game is not that good either because you're not spending hellfire there. I like that there's a kind of a balance here. If you play defensively, you're not good at offense. If you play offensively, you're not really good at defense. I'm intrigued to see which play style wins out, and I hope it's not the third play style of just maneuvering all game. So I think he'll have an interesting spot in the meta as like a nice counter to people with 1 health sidekicks. I can't believe I haven't mentioned this already, but Sun Wukong gets completely wrecked by Ghost Rider. That is a-okay with me, I suppose, but hopefully he doesn't overstay that meta niche and just become an all-around OP character because he can deal 1 or 2 damage to you every single turn on demand. We'll see. I am optimistic. I don't think that will happen, but let's keep our fingers crossed and watch out. So this was my first impressions video of Ghost Rider. The videos from Moon Knight and Luke Cage should be out by the time you're watching this video. I think he's an interesting character. I love the resource characters like Beowulf. They're fun to play. It gives you another little like side thing to manage, and Ghost Rider's just cool. He's a burning skeleton, and you can just laugh maniacally like Nick Cage when you're playing him. I love this card art, and I love this card art. Although this Like, this is just horrifying. So please let me know what you think of Ghost Rider in the comments. Was I wrong about everything? Is he weak? Is he going to be the worst character in the game? No, he's not, because Spike exists, but we'll see. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully it was a little bit shorter than my other first impressions video, like Battle of Legends Volume 2. I think that was like an hour and a half. So yeah, as always, like, subscribe, and yeet!